particularly in view of the trends that we have discussed here, I think we have to understand that global governance doesn't mean global government. This organization is, UN is an organization which is supposed to always keep the peoples in the center, but we are represented by member states. Member states are insisting that we should bring out certain principles, sovereign equality of course, but also territorial integrity and sovereignty. It comes back all the time. So I think when it comes to global governance, we have to ask ourselves, how can we convince governments that there is a need for an international dimension of maintaining peace and security, providing development, and respecting rule, hopefully for most of them, although I'm not sure, human rights and rule of law. And for that, I think, starting with the Security Council, I think the most important thing is to make sure that the Security Council more and more turns into a negotiation body where the veto power is not used, or the threat of the veto is not used as much as has been the case in the past. I think we should expect from the Security Council in the future to be accepting that they have been given this gift, particularly the Permanent Five, of the veto, but that is, veto is something that should be used as a very last instance, the very last resort. I would even go as far as to say that in some ways the threat of the use of veto, or the veto, is a sign of failure. That the Security Council hasn't really been able to come out with a binding formula for our work. Kofi Annan, our first negotiator in Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, our second, worked completely their whole period without a binding Security Council resolution. Staffan de Mistura finally got a resolution 18th of December last year. And I think the Security Council has an obligation to sit down and negotiate and come out with a resolution which corresponds to the role the Security Council should play for international peace and security. Jokingly, and it's a joke, but there is a serious dimension to it, I sometimes think that the Security Council should work and don't jump, like the Catholic Church when they select popes. You know how they do it? They lock them up, the cardinals in the Sistine Chapel, and they get out only when the white smoke comes out. So in a way, I hope they will turn into a negotiation body and come out with resolutions that reflect their responsibility of maintaining international security and not passing this, going just past it and let the war continue, like the war in Syria. But I think the Sustainable Development Goals as a sort of an umbrella for a world that moves in the direction of true development on the basis of sustainability is really a form of, maybe the word governance sometimes will scare people, but it is really a framework which is now agreed by member states and which could serve as a form of governance. And of course, I would also hope that the human rights bodies, the human rights conventions, the international humanitarian law, the Refugee Convention of 1951 become also governance tools. They have been signed on. Many of my predecessors, diplomats, have been negotiating day and night to get those documents out. They should also be seen as a form of governance. Well, actually, you could have had a microphone in the car with Michael Muller and me when we talked about human resources and planning. And I can tell you that yes, we definitely need to reform this human resources. I understand that for me always HR was human rights, but HR is also human relations, isn't it, and human resources. And I think we can do much better. The process of engaging people is very slow, and that's probably why there's been this proliferation of consultancies and different types of contracts. And I also think that it's enormously difficult to change the hierarchical structures, make sure that young people come into the decision making, and that we involve people. We have the most fantastic, some of you possibly will join us, and you have 1 or 2 degrees and you have been volunteering in the world and you've done great jobs, and still you get stuck in the end in a P2 or P3 position, rather low on the professional side, and not seeing the totality of the UN. We need to really bring in, as I said earlier, work with young people. So I understand your question and the underlying frustration that I heard in your voice. You are absolutely right. You know, preaching to the converted, preaching to the choir. I still think that you can run with a baton, pick up the best pieces and pass it on to others, and also to people in your family, in your village, in your town. When I spoke at this event in Sweden, there was the whole Swedish nation. When I said it's not only Sweden in the world, it's the world in Sweden. And I got some email back, well, you don't know how difficult it is for us to integrate all refugees and all that. Fine, but still, I made my case, and it went back, went all over the case. And this is why I appealed to you from the very beginning, and the Vice Rector's introductory comments, is that we need to have that narrative. Maybe we need to take off our tie. I was a bit concerned that the director here said in his introduction that he had not expected me to give such a good lecture. That's a bad sign. Someone from the UN should read out his speech, and it should be predictable, printable, everything. That's a pretty bad sign for us, that we really need to connect them. So I challenge you, face up to it, and also stand up for values. I refuse to have people insult others and not take a chance to hit back, not hit back, I'm sorry, argue back. It's very important for your dignity, and I think to make the case, that, for instance, now going to the last question on the US, I was ambassador in Washington for 5 years. I was first secretary in Washington for 4 years. I went to high school in America, in a little town called Decatur, Indiana. It was phone calls to my classmates back in those days that made me wonder whether Trump wouldn't win the election, because all of them were for Trump. But I met people on both sides of the aisle when I was in Washington 2 days this week. And I made the case very soberly that, fine, you may not like the UN, but listen, don't you want the UN to be part of the peacekeeping, take over peacekeeping, or do you want to go there yourself with the responsibility as a major power? Don't you want to have election monitoring in countries where we're questionable democracies? Don't you want to listen to the American people who want children to be vaccinated, or women to be saved in their birth, when they give birth? Don't you want to help the refugees? After all, don't you think the American people will continue to ask for that? Don't you want to deal with terrorism, not only in military terms, but also the underlying forces? And you know, you can make that case whether you are whatever administration, whatever color you have of government. So I think the logic of international cooperation is very strong. And I think we should be proud of this. We are cowering and we are leaning back and avoiding, now this language comes there and you are on the defensive. We should be standing tall and stand up for these values and do the thing that we think is right. This senator that I talked about, he was a Democrat. And I was wondering what's going to happen with the climate change agreement. And he said, well, it's going to be tough, but still remember, 30 states in the United States have legislation which is based on the Clean Air Act. What do you do about legislation that 30 states have already adopted in their state legislatures? He said hundreds of cities have introduced regulations for the cities. If you go to Portland, Oregon, it's a completely climate neutral city, no CO2 emissions. They are clean as anything else because the city has decided they want to be a clean city. And he said that 300,000 plus people are working with renewable energy in the United States. Only 65,000, 68,000 coal miners, coal workers. How about the 300,000 that work on renewable energy projects? They will continue. And some of the private sector now see that the strategic choices for them will be based on sustainability, will be based hopefully on human rights, so that they can proudly stand up for their companies, I hope, and that they will recruit the best people. I don't think you want, even if you're crying out for a job, to work with a company that has lousy standards on human rights or on environment or on labor legislation. No. And this, I think, is sinking in more and more. And I think in the world Well, people think the governments will decide everything. Fine, governments are important. I was minister, I was deputy minister of everything. But in today, you have so many other actors. You have the private sector I just mentioned, you have the civil society, you have the scientific world, the academic world, you here. All of us. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something, and you can do so much. When Michael told me that you want to have people go into camps to be able to interpret immediately when the refugees come in, you can do something. There's a refugee child coming in into a town, and to, you know, teach their language, whatever, is something you can do. You don't have to be Deputy Secretary General or member of the Security Council. Everybody has an obligation to do this. And we have to mobilize the good forces now. We have to mobilize that narrative, go for that narrative, more active. Okay, I think I'll take one more round, but I shouldn't talk so much myself. So, short answers are short questions, short answers, 3 of them. Mr. Director.
So maybe up
further up, yeah.
in the room.
Three last, because I have to leave.
So, thank you very much. My name is Paul, student here. You mentioned